When Brigham Young died, the church was strong but not finished. Some of the hardest questions were still unresolved. He had led the saints west, governed a territory, enforced doctrine, and shaped a culture that would endure for generations. And yet, for all that he resolved, he left behind challenges later leaders would inherit without clear answers. Brigham Young led the church for more than 30 years. During that time, authority became centralized, obedience became essential, and unity became synonymous with survival. His leadership brought order and stability to a people who had known chaos and exile. But certainty, once established, has a way of outliving the person who declared it. And that raises an important question. What happens when certainty remains, but the leader who enforced it is gone? One of the first unresolved issues was how prophetic authority should function without a dominant figure. Brigham Young exercised control in ways few leaders before or after him ever would. After his death in 1877, the church did something unusual. It did not immediately reorganize the first presidency. That pause revealed uncertainty. Leadership continued, but the style changed. Authority became more collective, more cautious, and less absolute. So consider this carefully. Was this a natural evolution of leadership, or a response to the risks Brigham Young's model exposed? Doctrine presented another challenge. Teachings Brigham Young enforced during his lifetime on race, authority, obedience, and dissent remained in place long after his death, even as their foundations quietly weakened. When change eventually came, it was framed as revelation, not correction. That framing preserved continuity, but it avoided a harder question. If a teaching is later abandoned, was it unresolved truth or unresolved responsibility? Brigham Young also left behind a cultural legacy. Obedience had become deeply ingrained, not just as faith, but as identity. Loyalty to leadership was treated as a spiritual safeguard. Later leaders inherited a church that valued unity, sometimes at the expense of open questioning. Over time, the language softened. Agency and compassion were emphasized more clearly, but traces of that earlier culture remain. Members still wrestle with where sustaining leaders ends and silencing doubt begins. That tension didn't start in the modern church. It was built into the system Brigham Young strengthened. None of this means Brigham Young failed. The church survived because of his leadership. Communities flourished. Stability replaced instability. But survival strategies don't always translate cleanly into long-term spiritual health. What works in crisis can create challenges in peace. How does a church move from survival-based obedience to mature, reflective faith without breaking trust? Later leaders didn't erase Brigham Young's influence, they managed it. Some teachings were contextualized. Others were reframed. A few were left largely unexplained. History became something to approach carefully rather than proclaim boldly. That approach has protected many members and unsettled others. Is unresolved history a weakness or the cost of institutional continuity? In the end, Brigham Young didn't just shape the church he led. He shaped the questions it would spend generations learning how to live with. Authority, obedience, doctrine, and memory all were left with open edges. And those open edges are still felt today, not because leaders failed to lead, but because certainty is easier to declare than it is to unwind. History doesn't demand verdicts. It reveals inheritance. And one inheritance Brigham Young left behind is this: a church strong enough to endure and complex enough to keep asking hard questions long after his voice was gone. What responsibility do later leaders have for questions they didn't create, but inherited? Is resolving the past about finding answers or learning how to live honestly with complexity? If you value LDS history, examine carefully, without fear and without shortcuts. Follow for more, and share your thoughts below. This conversation is still unfolding.